Hello and welcome to The Unknown Truth. And this is our first official podcast video, video, audio, or wherever you're listening on. And I'm joined here by Freddie Frederick the Frog Moyle.
Just Frederick.
I'd call him the Frog. After all, he does like Freddos. Anyway, and here we are investigating about the disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa. Now, Fred, do you know anything about Jimmy Hoffa?
I know he was related to the mafia somehow and that he went missing.
Here we are, solving the mystery of Jimmy Hoffa. Now, onward we go into the unknown truth. Jimmy Hoffa was born in 1913 in the state of Indiana in the United States of America. His father died in 1920 due to a lung disease, maybe from a long smoking addiction or working in mills. This information we did not find out because it was not with the case. He left.
I have a bit of input.
Go ahead.
If it was coal mines, it would have been a black lung.
I said mills.
Same thing.
That's cotton one. I think we
Never
both.
mind.
He left school in 1927 at the age of 14, so he can begin a work life in manual labour. This got him into the Teamsters in the future, and we'll get into that very soon. That's his backstory. All short. In 1932, Jimmy Hoffa joined the Teamster Union, and he worked for the Trucker Union mainly. He played a big role in the strikes. Throughout the years, the Teamsters created strikes that would make the Teamsters more popular around the working class, and also they would make the pay higher and then the hours lower. It was all basically a big plan. Due to his hard work in the Teamsters, in 1946 he became the president of Local 299, which was a truckers union basically, and he had a ambition. He wanted to become president of the Teamsters, and most of the ways you have to have good contacts, and the big contacts during that time were the 5 families in New York. At the time, that was run by mobster Russell Bufalino, who ran a lot of stuff. He worked with another boss named Angelo Bruno, who was also known as the Gentle Don. I'm sure you would know who he is, Freddy, right?
No, but why was he called the Gentle Don?
The Gentle Don, because he, instead of killing people or going right, he was like, alright, instead of killing each other, we're going to work this out. That's all he was like. He was actually pretty good at it too, until he himself was killed in 1980. He became president of the Teamsters in 1957 after David Beck resigned. He was in with people like Russell Bufalino, as I said, and Angelo Bruno. He also was with Tony Jack and Tony Pro, who was a Teamster called Anthony Prozavino, I don't know. He was also within the likes of Anthony Fat Tony Salerno, who was a big head of the boss of the mob, and he
Besides on big.
yeah, he was big, and he was also in a big part of the mafia. He was famous for having a cigar and a flat pack, and he also supposedly sanctioned the hit on Jimmy, which we'll get into later. So, in the 1960s, Jimmy Hoffa was sentenced by Robert Kennedy to prison for 8 years for tampering and mail fraud. Throughout those 8 years, he had a falling out with fellow Teamster and fellow cellmate Tony Pro, where they got into a fight. Jimmy Hoffa and Tony Pro's relationship then deteriorated throughout the years, and this must have contributed to his disappearance. For that, it was not a good idea for him to just do that. 1975, Hoffa disappeared. He wanted to retain his leadership, so he wanted support from Tony Pro and Tony Jack. Hoffa went to Tony Pro for his support, but in the end, Tony Pro said, and this quote, that he will cut his head off and gouge his eyes out. End quote. He was a brutal man. He killed anyone that would get in his way. That would include Hoffa, which made him a suspect. Now, so he went to a meeting in 1975 with Tony Jack, but that day he disappeared. July 20th, 1925. Hoffa was waiting for a meeting with Tony Pro and Tony Jack, and this is around 2 p.m. and he was waiting. He arrived at the Red Fox Diner at 1:15. He was waiting and waiting. Around 2:15, he was getting really impatient, and so he called his wife, and he was saying, and he said in a quote that they better get here soon, otherwise he would just leave, he would just go. That they would go to Philadelphia and leave the country because he would know then that he was a target. But between 2:45 and 2:50, he went into a Marine Lincoln or Mercury with 3 other people who were unidentified to this day, and there was only ever one witness to that. These are the theories that we have found, and collectively, me and Frederick the Frog have finally came up with 3 main theories. And these 3 theories are just amazing. They are one of the best theories we could find, really. And I'm sounding like Donald Trump here. Anyway, let's get on to it. So, first theory is that Tony Pro and Tony Jack just killed him. They had him killed, which is the main theory, the biggest theory we have, because he was going to a meeting with them, meaning they would have had him killed if he didn't come back. So, the evidence to this is that the evidence is they denied anything. And yet, the Maroon 1975 Mercury was a car that belonged to his son. It belonged to Tony Jack's son. It's evidence. It's conclusive evidence that it would have been him. And blood was found in it. And his hair was in it. Which must have evidence that he was in that car and he was killed in that car. They most likely incinerated his body. Theory number 2 is that it's an accidental death. And this is only by one guy. Vincent Piasanto said that he would have been accidentally killed by one of the men that Tony Jack would have sent to pick him up, because they may have found him as a threat, or that they thought they were going to kill him. With that would have been a big mistake. And there's not really much evidence, because there's not much accidental killings in the Mafia, but it does say that Vincent said that the Mafia did not kill him that way, and that they wouldn't kill him that way, they wouldn't make someone mysteriously disappear. The final theory that we have is the most famous theory and the most popular theory. Frank Sheeran. This is chapter I Heard You Paint Houses. Frank Sheeran was an Irishman. He was the Irishman, as they call him. He was a hitman for Russell Buffalino and part of the one of the Teamsters Union, and he was a leader of one of them.
What's the Teamsters Union? Because you've mentioned the Teamsters, but
The Teamsters Union, the Trucker Union, that's part of the Teamsters, really. They're just a part of it. And he had a deathbed confession with Charles Brandt in 2000. And for 3 years, Charles Brandt kept coming back. He said that Chucky O'Brien picked up Hoffa and took him to a home. And in the car with him was Salvatore Sally Bugs in Detroit. They went to Detroit and took him into a house. And this is where he shot Hoffa in the back of the head twice. But the blood found in the car were not his. In the house, too, they were not his either. So, DNA did not say it was Hoffa. And also, another piece of evidence that said that that Hoffa wasn't killed by Sheeran was that in 2019, a former capo of the Gambino crime family, Michael Francesi, said that Frank Sheeran did not kill him because he was not a hitman, supposedly. And that if you were going to find him, quote, you'll have to look somewhere wet, end quote. And this means that he would have been put somewhere in the sea, maybe in a river nearby, which is where a lot of mafia hits were done. The main suspects of the case was Tony Pro, who was born in 1917 and died in 1988. And he was part of the Teamsters Union, and a leader of one, and also was a ruthless hitman. Not hitman, but ruthless mob boss. And he said, without even looking like he was shocked, or even acting like he was shocked, he said, I was shocked. And this is in a recording, in a testimony of him amending the fifth, saying that all these were incriminating him. And so he just decided to say that he was shocked because he didn't want to get convicted. He died in 1988 due to a heart attack, which obviously because of his age. Tony Jack, born in 1919, died in 2001 due to heart failure, and there was a lot of evidence going against him. His son had the same exact car that was supposedly drove Hoffa off to his death. He was the main guy who was with him in the car. It was all supposed to go to a meeting with him, so he basically couldn't do much. So he was mainly arrested for it, but not convicted. He said he was convicted with other stuff. Sally Bugs, a hitman, born 1913, died 1975. He was shot 4 times in the chest and face, but supposedly by Frank Sheeran. And this makes it pretty sure that he may have killed him and had a lot of information or would have given it out. So the poor guy was shot. He was one of the most vicious hitmen in the mafia. So this makes it likely that he would have been chosen to kill Hoffa due to Tony Pro hiring him to kill him, not hiring him, but getting him to kill another rival of his, and also putting him to a wood chipper, which would have been making disposing the body pretty simple and kind of messy. Next one. Oh, another thing. He also said, to every question asked to him about Hoffa, no comment. That makes him guilty, doesn't it, Freddie?
Does not make him guilty. It means he's not going to comment on anything about Hoffa.
Because he may incriminate him.
Well, yeah, he might incriminate himself.
Correct. He was also killed. Makes him more likely. Russell Buffalino may have ordered the hit. And he was born in 1903 and died in 1994. So, he may have ordered the hit. And he said, I will give no comment. And I was nowhere near I gave no murders out. I was at a wedding. He was not in Detroit. He was at a wedding. His brother's wedding. Well, his niece's wedding. That makes it quite likely he may have sent someone else, or that he didn't order it. He was just at a wedding. Fat Tony Salerno was just another guy who may have ordered the hit and had the same reason as Tony Jack. And finally, Frank Sheeran would have been the killer, which is the most likely would have been the killer, but not the main killer, maybe a side killer, or maybe not killer at all? And is this because he had a deathbed confession? And this is all recorded in the news. And so, thank you for listening to us. This is the Unknown Truth. Hope you all have a wonderful day. And goodbye from me, David Hurley, and goodbye from the frog. Say your goodbyes.
Goodbye.
He's a bit crazy. He's going to a psych ward tomorrow. Have a lovely day, everyone.